So you might have come across this term testable, right? We listen about this term quite a lot, especially nowadays. Like in a microservices kind of architecture, people talks about more about testables. So what exactly is a testable? How it is related to mocks, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that. So basically, testable is nothing but a component, okay? So which helps us to remove a dependency on unavailable things. For example, any piece of code is unavailable. We can replace that with testable. Any API is not available. Any database is not available, right? Any mail servers are not available, so we can actually replace that with a test double. It's as the name implies, right? So it is, you are actually creating a testing object which mimics no, the real object for you, right? So to certain extent. Okay, so yeah, when to use, or how actually test doubles help us. Like suppose you need to connect to a database and assume that it is in the cloud or any other place. So yeah, database is not available, and then how you will actually proceed, without that, right? So in that kind of scenarios, test double can help us create a mocked database kind of object, and you can proceed in your development as well as testing activities. Similarly for web services, right? So during the development, most of the time we see, okay, no, front end and a back end, right? So they need to actually work independently, right? So suppose the back end guys are actively working on creating some APIs, and front end, people are working on the design of the front end. So they really don't need to wait till the backend is ready, right? So they can actually, if they know the structure of the response they're expecting, so they can very well mock those services, so that they don't spend more time, unnecessary time, on waiting for others to proceed, basically, because their work is different, right? So they mainly concern on how actually user will be sending the data using those APIs. So if they knows the response well ahead, they can actually create mocks, and they can very well speed up in their development activities. So another thing you can say, suppose your database is very slow, or you are connecting to a web service which is very slow. And this is that is hampering your development as well as testing activities. In that scenario, you can also mimic a database object which can very quickly return your desired output, basically, to do some kind of testing what on your code. Okay, so similarly for web services also, because mocks will be like faster, right? So they server will just immediately return if it is getting matching with the available services, right? So that will be always faster than the real services. And another example I could see, think about a message queue or mail servers, right? So suppose for a particular scenario, you need to send some message to a message queue, and maybe the queue will, based on some processing, some logic, it will send a mail to a mail server, and then it's basically a chain of asynchronous calls, right? So in those kind of scenarios, again, no, it will add up to your dependency list, right? And add up to your time needed to test the thing. So at unit level, yeah, obviously we can actually mock those services, right? So services, and get a response out of it, and then proceed, right? Similarly for third party services, mostly in API world, we use mocks for testing the third party services, so that we can actually independently test our part, like whatever we have implemented, and whatever is dependent on the third parties, we can mock it, and then At least make sure, from our side we are ready. And once like third parties are available, we can integrate it, and then we can test the entire piece as a end-to-end point of view. When I'm talking about a database, right? So database is again a costly affair, right? So you have to, for example, you are using a cloud database, right? So you have to pay as per the users, correct? And if the database is suppose not available sometime, so you cannot actually test your stuff, right? So the libraries like Mockito and all, right, so that will help you to create a database object basically. So it will create a dummy connection to a dummy database, and then it will return the object, and you can actually proceed, because Mockito will itself will send you the database responses, like suppose in a database, right? So you will get response like record set kind of object, right? So this mocking frameworks will give you that object basically, and then using that object you can very well proceed to the next step. Similarly, web services also, when you mock it, right, so you will be mocking only the response. uh, we can also mock the entire thing. I'll talk about it, like what is a very no, sophisticated API mocks are also available. But in general, if you say API mocks, right, what we do basically, we'll mock the maybe query parameters, right? Then we'll send the exact replica of that API. Suppose you are connecting to this one, right, Dropbox, right? You want to verify the file upload functionality, right? So in your code, maybe you have given some of the forms and all where you will upload the files. Now Dropbox API is not available, right? So how you will actually go ahead and test the entire thing? So what you will do, the file upload API, right? So you have to create an exact replica of that API, and you have to host that API in a mocking environment. Basically, when I say we are mocking web services, right? So you need basically a server where you will be keeping your responses, like your mock responses or your examples. Now, as soon as your API hits that URL, right? So your endpoint, basically mocked endpoint, instead of the real endpoint, it will give you return the mocked response, whatever you have saved it, right? The request should be exactly same as you have saved, and it will also return the same response, basically. When we see the example, then I think it will be more clear. Responses also we need to actually define. For example, you are creating a user, right? So for creating a user, you need to send maybe username, no, password, address, phone number, and now and fields, right? So in that post request, so what you have to do basically, you have to mock the entire thing, like your post body, right? You have to mention like, okay, this particular request is actually taking this many body parameters. This is the URL. Only your host name will be your mock server name, mock server URL basically. The other part of your URL will be same. And then when you reach the mock server, it will return like exactly same what you are expecting. Now how it will return? Based on your response, you have saved it. Suppose after creating a user, you want to send a message like success message, right, or error message, depending on the scenario. So you can save those messages, and you want to send a 200 response, everything you can create it. Okay, we'll see that in detail. So okay, before going to APIs, right, since testable is a unit testing terminology, right? So as we know, it comes from the unit testing. So I want you to at least give a very high level overview on what is testable in terms of unit testing, right? So you can see here in this diagram, like in testable is, you can say it is a superset of all this, like dummy object, stub. You might have heard about all those things, right? So spy, mock object, fake object, right? So don't confuse this with API, mainly because in API also we will use some of it, but in a different context. I'll explain you what is the context from a API point of view. So in the next slide, but this slide is mainly from a unit testing point of view. Okay, so what is a dummy basically? So dummy is it's just a dummy object. It will return you a hard coded response. That's all. No, it will not do anything else. Suppose you want to return, you have a method called add two numbers. It will return 10. Maybe for some testing purpose, you want to return something. You hard code it, and when the actual function or actual object or actual method is available, you can replace dummy with the real one. This is dummy doesn't have any intelligent or any logic inside. It's just a hard coded stuff. So when we say stub, right, stub means no, you are actually giving some behavior to stub, no, from the actual scenario, right? So some little bit behavior, like it's not just a dummy. I'll show you one example also in a while. So consider that stub has some little bit of behavior than the dummy. It's not just a hard coded stuff. So spy and mock, those two are important actually. So when you say mock, right, so mock means mainly what mock object means, you can actually define what that object will do and what exactly that object will return. So those kind of things you can control. Okay, and in spy it is actually a you can say better version of stuff, but it has a monitoring capabilities, as well as in the spy you can control, like so for example, in one object you want to create a testable, and some part of the object you don't want to actually mock, and some part of the object you want to mock, right? So in that kind of scenarios you can use spice. Okay, and fake is like very close or alternate implementation, like maybe you have also created something of that, but not exactly same, but you can say a alternate copy basically. So you have also put some effort to create that, but yeah, end of the day it is not the actual one, but it is a copy of it. Okay, let me quickly show you in code how it looks like, so that at least you can relate, like spy and mock. Okay, this is a Mockito library, so we'll be using Mockito library. So see, this is an employee payment service class. Okay, so we have basically here three methods, public methods here, simple ones. Okay, the first method is get the number of working days. Okay, so if you are giving an employee ID, so based on the employee ID, it will return the number of working days. Now for time being, the logic will be here. Maybe it will connect to database, it will query it based on employee ID, and it will get the number of working days for that particular employee ID. But now suppose I am hard coding it, some value I am putting it, and then returning the number of working days. Similarly, we have a get salary per day. So same method, like based on the employee ID, what is the salary actually it will get. Some logic you can add it here. Again now, assume that this functionality has been under development, and developer has added some dummy data for time being to proceed. And then I have another method called process pay. So this is important here. It will take employee ID, employee working days, and salary per day. Okay. So what exactly it is doing? So it will be doing basically in the future, right? It will call get salary third party call. Basically, it will call to a third party method. Okay, and then it will get that salary. But again, this is not ready. So I'm returning something like some dummy. Okay. So in this class, right, so how we can actually use this mock and spy object, I just want to show you that. uh, Now, first I'm creating a mock object here, right? So you can see at the rate mocked annotation, employee payment service. This is my mock object. Okay. So mock object means it will actually mock everything, right? So you can define, what the mock object will return. Whenever you are calling that object, right? So what the mock will return, you can define. So suppose I am passing these same values which were hard coded in that class, right? So you can see here this mock object dot get, that means you are calling that function, right, with any string. You are passing anything, then it should return whatever is here in this class, right? So you are actually setting up your mock basically, right? Now when you actually create no, get that call that actual method, right? So actual method means it will return from here, the mock also will return something. Okay. So get employee, get number of working days, employee id, since we have given any string, right? So it will return this particular value from this particular mock basically, no? So and then there's an assertion, so it should match, because I'm giving whatever is here and my class also is the same values, so it will match. This is way how we actually use mock basically. You can see for the three methods, right, I have mocked completely. But when you see no spy, right, so if you're seeing spy, again in a similar way I am creating an object. Okay. But I'm actually mocking here only the process to pay, that method. Okay. So other methods, I'm not mocking, so it will return the whatever is there in that method only. So when you create a spy, so you have an option to actually skip any of the methods. But in a mock, like if you are skipping, if you're not returning, it will be null. And here if you are skipping, it will return the actual object only. That is the main difference between mock and spy in unit testing. If you see in the mocked, for each method I have added then returned something, right?
Yes.
So what exactly this means I am actually setting up the mock to return something. If I don't use then return for any of the method will actually return null
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you create a spy object, right? So in the spy object, I have actually set only for the process pay method, then return, right?
Yes.
So what exactly it means is, like, suppose I'm calling the other two methods, right, from the spy object, it will give the, or it will call the actual methods, not the mocked one.
Yes.
Okay. But in mock, if you are not uh, setting up those things, right, so those will be null.
Yeah.
The other things will be specifically, you have to specify the return type of each methods in the mock. Unit testing point of view. Okay. So let's go to now API mocking, because I wanted to give you a no, at least a context, right? So from where these stub mocks are coming into picture. So okay, let's go dig into the API mocking now, right? So we know the what is testable, what is the meaning of all those terminologies, right? So basically in API world, you will see these four types of mocks. Okay. Stubbing, mocking, simulation, and virtualization. Okay. Stubbing is, yeah, again, it, you can consider it as a basic placeholder, right? So in your test, in your application code itself, you can stub it and you can return whatever values you want to return. So this will not be having any kind of intelligence basically. Okay. But mocking is again a you are adding some basic level of functionality, at least the basic values you are returning. But when I say simulation means it is like a complete functionality. You are considering all scenarios basically. Suppose you have an API, right? So you want to mock it. Now, depending upon your your time and availability, right? So you may consider, okay, I want to mock only the uh, positive scenarios, right? So let's not do anything beyond it. So you can create only for those scenarios, like a basic no positive cases. But when I say simulation means, like, you are considering everything, like, what will happen if the user sends a different query parameter, what will happen user send a different, user is sending wrong payloads, right? So all combinations, all positive negative scenarios, when you say, when you actually create, yeah, this is little tough to replicate in complex API. But yeah, if you are able to do it, then we consider that as a complete simulation of the API. Basically, see, in real world sometimes, APIs might be complex, right? So that may have multiple calls to external parties, then that may be asynchronous in nature, that may be connecting to different systems, right? So how close your mock is to the real API, that's actually differentiate this. Again, mock and simulation, it's similar, it is context dependent, I can say, right? Mostly some people also call, if you are mocking only the basic functionality also, they call it as a simulation only. I'm simulating my API. So again, these terminologies are context dependent, and you can use either mock or simulation, any one of it, depending on your context. But stub is actually, very basic, it is like a placeholder. Then one more thing is virtualization. There are some companies which provides this service virtualization tools. Okay, so service virtualization is actually a advanced level of API mocking, so which can give you production like API. So it should have everything, your all functionality, your management stuff, like API calls, and then your billing, right? So your monitoring, everything it should give. Then only we call it as a sophisticated mock or virtualized mock, like, it is called a service virtualization. I think smart bear have a service virtualization tool, and other tools are also available. So those are like used when actually you need very complex kind of scenarios to simulate. Now, quickly, when to use mocking, and what kind of benefits actually, it gives us, right? First thing is, during development we can always use mocking. Okay, so what benefit it provide, like, it will free up the developers to do the real coding, than unnecessarily spending time on working on the dependencies. So it actually speed up the development process. Next thing is, while doing the functional testing, it is very helpful, because if you have a mock, right? So suppose, I'll give you the similar example. Suppose you have a front end team and back end team, both are working together, right? So yeah, but they are working independently on their respective stories. Now, as a tester, right, so you need to start writing your test. Maybe you will write, the front end test, back end test first, right? So you want to start with the API test, right? So because UI also is getting ready. So what you will do when the APIs are not ready, right? So what exactly, how you will quickly get started with writing your, mostly maybe, you may be aware of, what is the functionality of those APIs, or maybe the return request and return patterns, basically, right? So if you have that kind of information, what you can do, basically, you can create a mocking servers, right? You can create a mocking servers, and you can start writing your scenarios, basically, right? So when you have a something available to see, right? So okay, you are sending this particular request and it is returning this. You are creating a you are sending a post request, and these are the parameters, and you are, it should actually, it should return, this is the it should return this response basically, right? So you have to put assertions on the response. If you know that right up to that part, and you can simulate that part, right? So you can very well, write your test using Postman or any other thing, right? So you can play around with that. You can add all your assertions well ahead before the API is ready. When the API is ready, only thing you have to change is your URL basically, right? Because the team has already agreed to develop this, right, in your story. So you have the details now. Instead of the mock URL, you change it to the actual URL, whatever your team, wherever your implemented API is deployed, right? So and then you can very well proceed. Otherwise, like, you have to wait till the API is complete, right, and then deployed, and then only you can start your testing. But here you can start your testing well ahead the development. Okay. So mocking up external components, right? So sometimes, yeah, this is like, suppose you have multiple development teams working together, right? So typically in a microservices kind of environment, so everyone will be responsible to develop their own microservice, and the microservices will be, talking to each other. So in that case, again, you can actually mock the external components. Basically, that might not be external to your company, but external to your team, right? So you can mock out those things, and you can proceed with your own work. So that's where the mocks can help. Then we can also, no, it can also help in non-functional testing. So how it helps in non-functional testing, right? So basically, the response from a mock is faster, right? So what you can do, you can create your load test scenarios, right? So different scenarios you can see, and suppose you want to simulate something like, how the API will behave in a low bandwidth network like 2G or 3G or 4G, like that, right? So those kind of things, even from the Postman also you can simulate, right? So till the actual environment is ready, you can actually, simulate those kind of non-functional testing scenarios. You can create your test scripts ready beforehand, right? And another thing is, in the non-functional aspect is, like, suppose your API has, a dependency on an external world, right? So to do a complete load testing, you may need the complete stuff, right? Because but here with a mock, right? So how much time actually your API is taking, and how much time your no actual API is taking, that also you can write a test basically, right? So once that API is ready, you can integrate, and you can test the you can check the entire timeline. Now this will actually help you to identify bottlenecks in specific component. Suppose you have a test which is like complete thing, right? So you may not be able to identify the bottleneck is because of your API, or bottleneck is because of the external API. But if you have a test which you can switch between real and mock, you can very well, identify the bottleneck, where exactly it's coming from. Okay. So in this situation also, the mocks actually help. Then another important use case can be, like evaluation and demonstration for, specific API for your clients. Suppose, you are developing some APIs, okay, for a specific customer. Now maybe, the entire functionality is not ready, but yeah, maybe some basic functionalities are ready, and you want to give that feel to your customers, like, to try out, right? So you can very well, mock whatever is not ready, and give a prototype kind of environment, sandbox kind of environment to the customers, and tell them like, okay, you can play around without, much worrying about, like, billing and all. You can just, basic functionality is ready, and you can play around with this. So customer may not know, like, internally what you are doing, like maybe, some functionality you have mocked it out, right? So this is also, helps, right? Mocks helps to do a quick prototyping. right? Suppose you want to show even not even API level, right? So suppose you want to show something, some working thing. Front end guys, wants to give some demo, but backend is not ready, right? So how, but front end wants a quick feedback from the customer on the front end part only, right? So instead of waiting till the back end part is ready, then schedule the demo. No, we will not do that, right? So we will mock the back end. We'll show no what and all are there in the expected in the front end. We'll implement that part, and we'll show a demo to the customer and give it and get a feedback basically, right? We can also tell them like backend is mocked now, but we want a feedback only on the front end, like no usability point of view, like okay, so this layout is good, or you want to change the layout, another layout, because those kind of things will not be dependent on the backend at all. This is like a you front complete design stuff, right? So in those scenarios also, mocking actually help. Okay, so there are some best practices, right? When to use mocking. So again, as I told, like we can actually record the behavior of response to be mocked. That will save time. So how to record the behavior of the response? Like tools like Postman or SOAP UI and all, right? So you can save your responses. You make a call and save your response. So if the API is already available, suppose you are testing a third party APIs which is like already available, you can make a call, one call, and then save the response and then add that to the mock. So that recording is possible. And yeah, it is always helps to increase our test coverage, because generally to test the negative scenarios and all, right? So it may not be possible always using the real APIs, right? So because this is costly, right? So you may be having so many negative scenarios, and suppose your real no third party API is having a billing already added, so each call will be billed, right? So yeah, in that case, no mocking can actually help, and we should use no leverage mocking in that kind of scenarios. Then again, it will enable you to continuous deployment and testing. That I think we have already covered, like how it actually helps in continuous development and as well as continuous testing.